In this video, we'll take a look at how to create a simple motion design twisted 3D logo reveal inside of After Effects. We'll design a polygonal background, use Element 3D to model and texture the 3D logo disc, and add a very effective digital pulse which distorts the background and scene. Welcome back everyone, hope you're doing well. If you're new to the channel, my name is Shaul and this is Animation Deconstructed. Now this is one of my longer tutorials, so I'm not going to waste any time. Let's jump straight into After Effects. So I'm going to start out with a composition 1920 by 1080p, 30 frames per second and 5 seconds long. And we'll start off by actually creating this polygonal background. I'm going to right click, create a new solid and call this BG. Doesn't matter what color this is. We will go over to the effects and presets panel and just type in gradient, and you'll choose that gradient ramp. And I want to add two colors if you want to follow along. 080010. The second color is 0C0019. I want to change this to a radial ramp, and this is our center of our radial. I'm going to take this down to the bottom, zoom out a little bit and move this to about here. And then I'm going to actually animate this on. So just pressing the T key, I'm going to take this down to 0, press shift and page down twice to move 20 frames over, and take this up to 100. Select both of these, press the F9 key for easy ease, and this will just fade on. Next thing I'm going to do is we're going to create the actual polygons. I'm going to hold down on the rectangle tool, come over to the polygonal tool, and make sure you're not selecting anything in the layer panel, and then just double click. I'm going to drop down this drop down menu, and we will then drop down the polystar path, and we'll change our points to 6. I'm also going to change the outer radius of this to 20. Then I'm going to move this over to around about here. I want to come over to the add button right over here, click it, and we're going to add a repeater. And you'll see that if I zoom in here, we've got 3 polygons. And I want to adjust the spacing first. So coming down to the repeater 1, we'll drop this down. We want to drop down the transform and then just come over to the position. And this is 20, so let's try the position at 40, see how that looks. Now I want to take my copies up, say about 49, add another repeater. So I'm going to pop this back up, come up to the add button and add another repeater. We'll do the same thing. So we'll come down here, we'll go to the transform, and we will change the copies to 2. And then I want to take off the position on the X to 0, and we're just going to drop this down. Let's say about 36, and just move this over. Let's make this 20 and just zoom in and see how that looks. It looks all right to me, and we're just going to pop this back up, come over to the add again, and we'll do one more repeater. We'll drop this down and transform, take it off the X, that down to 0, and then the Y, I'm going to actually drag this down to about here and just take the copies up. I think about 17 will do. And then I'm just going to reposition this. So I'm just holding shift and using the arrow keys until I'm happy with the position. Last thing I want to do is change the color of this. So if you've got a stroke on yours, just come over to stroke, turn that off, come over to the fill, make sure you've got a solid fill, and we're going to change the color of this to 140033. I'm going to press OK, and then I want to pre-compose this. So selecting the layer, Control Shift C to pre-compose, and we will call this pattern. And we're going to move all attributes into the new composition, press OK, and we have our polygon texture. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I will duplicate my background and hide the pattern for now. I'm going to change some colors, and I'm also going to change the position of this. So I'm going to take this center point of the radial gradient and move it to the middle. And then this one I'm going to move to the top right, and then I'm going to change the colors. So the first one's going to be 400050. Nice and bright, and the outer one we will do 040005. And then with this layer selected, we're going to come over to track matte, click on this, and we'll do an alpha inverted matte. Now, this is pretty bright, so I'm going to press the T key to bring up the opacity, and at 20 frames, because this is where it faded on, I'm going to take this down to 30% and then pop that back up. In this next part, we're going to create our halftone texture and then use Element 3D to model, texture, and animate our disc. Before we start with the twisted 3D logo, I'm going to create a texture, and that is that halftone texture which I placed on the actual 3D element. So I'm going to come over to create new composition, press OK, and we'll call this texture. 5 seconds long is fine. We'll make this 400 by 400. And I'm going to go over to the polygon tool, which is selected at the moment, change it to the rectangle tool, I'm going to double click that. I'm going to go over to the fill, click on that, and we will select the radial gradient. Also just going to pull this out slightly. I'm going to change some colors here. So we'll click on the actual gradient color, and then I'm going to select the colors. And the first color I'm going to do is FF0042. And this one I'm going to change to black. In order to create the halftone effect, we're going to come over to the effects and presets, type in CC ball, and you will get the CC ball action. Double click that and you'll see we start to have something popping up. We want to change the grid spacing to 15, and the ball size, let's take that way down to, let's say 41. And then I'm going to pop this back up and just clean out our timeline. If I change to my transparency grid, you'll see that we have no background at the moment. So what I want to do is actually right click, new solid BG black, let's call this, and change this to black. Press OK, and we'll just drop this behind our texture. Can close that texture, go back to our main composition. We'll drop this texture onto the timeline and just hide it. Then we're going to use Element 3D to create this twisted logo. So let's right click, new solid, call this Element 3D, and I'm going to change its color so that I can see it in my timeline easier. Press OK, and then I'll come over to Effect, go down to Video Copilot and Element. If you don't have the Element 3D, there is a link in the description. It is an affiliate link, so I do earn a commission from any sale from that. Otherwise, you can go straight to Video Copilot and buy from there. Let's change a few things. We have created a texture, so we need to come to the custom layers, drop that down. We are looking at texture maps. Drop that down, and we'll just use this layer 1 and point it at the texture, and then go into the scene setup. We're going to create everything inside here, so I'm going to use the create button over here and select the cylinder. Let's take the height right down. You can see if you just drag this down, we can actually scale this model as we like. I'm going to type in 0.14 here, and then I want to change the orientation. And if we drag this, you can see the orientation is actually our rotation. So let's type in 270, and that'll point at us. And if you want to move around here, just use your mouse wheel, click down, and you can pan. And if you click with the right mouse button, you can actually rotate around the scene. Now, if I zoom in here, this is pretty hard edged, and it's just because we don't have enough sides. I'm going to take the sides up to 60, and this should smooth everything out. I'm also going to change the chamfer segments to 5, and I'm going to change the UV mapping because I want to map this like it was a box. I'm going to click on this button here, which will jump straight to the position of UV mapping. And I'm going to change box preserve aspect. You can test all these other versions and see what happens to the texture if you're doing that. And then I'm going to open this up and we'll see our default texture here. Now I just want to adjust the diffuse just by clicking on that, and this pop down over here, I'm going to say custom texture layer 1. Then I'll press OK, and we can go around here and it'll map that texture to both sides. I'm going to come over to the create and we'll add a tube, and I'm going to change the orientation to 270. What I want to do is change the sides to 60 as well, so we get that smoothness of it. Then I'm going to change the height to, let's come down. Let's actually change the radius just to be a bit bigger. Let's say 0.52, and then we can play with the height a bit more and just move around this until we're happy with this. So 0.04 looks about good. And let's actually match that color of that pink. So I'm going to select this. If you click on the default or you drop down the tube model, we can select that, come down to the diffuse color and just type in FF003B and press OK. And then I just want one more tube model. So I'm going to come over to create tube, going to change the orientation again to 270. Change the height, let's say 0.13, and let's change the radius to 0.57. And then I want to just change the internal radius. Let's change that to 91. We're seeing some of that pink show out. Let's also change this material. So click on the material, come over here, and we'll just change this to black. Also want to change the sides, so 30 to 60 just to smooth that out, and that's looking pretty good. I'm going to press OK and go back to our scene. Now in order to work with this, we need to just drop down the group 1, and the particle look is the size and scale and everything that we want to change of this. Let's change the particle size. Let's see, about 16 maybe. And then I basically want this to come in from the left. It's going to come in and twist and then land in place over here. So I'm going to say about 1 second. I want it to be inside the screen. And then we're going to play with the rotation and actually twisting this. So we drop down the deform and we also drop down the rotation. We'll get all our options that we need. And we're going to rotate this on the Y. Let's say about -80, and then come down to the deform, and I want to use twist in this, and we're going to enable twist. And just note that every time you enable something, it's going to take more RAM to use. I'm going to twist this on the X, so let's just drag forward, say about 36. Then I'm going to keyframe this. So I'm going to keyframe the twist X, the Y rotation, and I'm going to keyframe the particle size. And then I also want to keyframe the position of this. So if we drop down the particle replicator, we can actually see the position XY, and we can keyframe that, and then press the U button, and we can come over to the left here, and you'll see if we hover in the middle here, we'll be able to grab hold of this position mechanism, and we can hold shift and move this off. Just want to leave it here for now, and I want to change the rotation and the twist. So the rotation, let's take that other side, so maybe 15. And the twist, let's come down here and change that to, let's go -60 something, -62. Let's try that. Looks pretty good. And I'm going to then move it off to the left. Next thing I want to do is just move forward half a second. So shift page down 10 frames, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with the page down button. And we can just change particle size to, say, about 14.7. Looks good. The rotation, I'm going to take that down to 0. And the twist down to 0 as well. And I'm going to select all these keyframes, press the F9 key, go into the graph editor, and make sure that you are in the speed graph. I'm going to select all these keyframes right here. You can zoom in on this just by dragging this over here. I want to adjust this to look something like this. Okay, something I want to do is just rotate half a revolution around so that it actually slams into place. So I'm going to come over to, let's exit the graph editor, and then this rotation particle, let's actually go this way around and make this 180 and give this one preview. Next thing I want to do is just add a glow to this. So what I want to do is, now that we have our animation done, Control D the layer to duplicate it. You can solo this so that you can see what's going to go on here. Go down to the output, and I'm going to go to where it says show composite, and we just want to show the diffuse layer, which will show us just the texture on that. Let's go to the top here. We can pop that up and then add a glow to this. So type in glow, double click, and let's just adjust this to, take this down, say about 35, and let's say about 30 pixels there, and change this layer to additive. Unsolo this and just give this a preview. In this final part, we'll create our digital pulse and finish off the reveal. So to create the pulse, I'm going to create a circle. So I'm going to hold down on the rectangle tool, come down to the ellipse tool, then making sure you've got nothing selected, just double click and then press the U button twice. And we will alt click on this little constraint proportions button, and it will create a perfect circle for us. Next thing I want to do is just change the size of this. 360 by 360 should be good. And I want to change this radial gradient. So I'm going to click on the radial button. Let's move this over to about here. I'm going to change this to black. I'm going to change this last one to white. Then I want to just drag this out to the edge. Just adjusting this gradient slightly more. And this white is going to basically be our pulse. Just going to move to about here. Pop this back up. Drop this below the element 3D. And I want this to start pulsing as this is landing. So let's say 1 second and 13 frames. Cut this layer just by bringing it forward. Press the S key for scale. Turn that on. I'm going to move 1 second forward. So just shift page down 3 times. And let's drag this up. I'm going to zoom out and just make this about 1491. Seems like it goes off the screen at that stage. Next thing I'm going to do is select this last keyframe, press the F9 key, go into the graph editor, and I just want to adjust this slightly. So I'm going to pull this back until we get this sort of straight line. And this just means that it will pulse really quickly and then fade out at an even speed. Now I want to duplicate the pattern, and this is how we're going to create that polygonal pulse. Turn it on, come over to Effects and Presets and type in Vegas, double click that, and then just change a few settings. First, change the blend mode to transparent. Then I'm going to come over to the image contours, drop this down. We want to change the threshold. So let's say about 5 should show us the actual polygons. And if you drag on this, you'll see that this is just working with the alpha channel of these objects. Segments, I only want one length, let's say about half of that, so 0.5. And then let's just make this pretty random just by turning on the random phase. Next thing I want to do is just change the color. So I'm going to change this yellow to 7C1CFF. Press OK, and I'm going to add a glow to this as well. So type in glow, double click. Let's just change the threshold to be 20 and the glow radius, let's take that up to about 24. And I want to cut this layer right around here at the end. So I'm just going to press page down for one more frame. Select the layer, Control-Shift-D to cut that layer and press OK. And I'm going to do the same to this pulse. We can actually just drag these in, drag that in. And then drop this pattern below the shape layer and choose Luma Matte. And this will use the black and white to reveal this pulse. I'm just going to recolor these two layers. Let's say fuchsia, drop that back up, and Control-D to duplicate this. And I'm going to move this over one keyframe. Then I want to just change the color of this. So selecting the actual pattern layer, I'm going to change this purple to FF0054. And then we're going to pre-compose this, but before we do, I want to save just one of these pulses. So duplicate that and just take it to the top. And then select all these layers over here, Control-Shift-C and call this pulse. And then this pulse over here, which is our black and white pulse, I'm going to just rename this layer to bump 1. Press OK, and we can hide that. Now the reason I want to do this is because I want to distort this background like it is actually pulsing in a 3D fashion. I'm going to Layer, New, Adjustment Layer. Let's rename this adjustment layer to Pulse 1, ADJ. Drop this above everything. Come over to the Effects and Presets and type in Glass. We're going to use the CC Glass. Double click, drop down the surface, and you want to change this to the bump 1. And you'll see something happens already. We'll change the softness. Take this up to, let's say, 150. Let's really scale up the height of this to 100. And then the displacement, we don't need that much, so about 60. I'm going to just crop this layer down as well, just so that we know what's going on here, and just recolor all of these to fuchsia. Let's just give this one preview. Now in the demo, I have this coming back in, and this is pretty easy to do. Select these two layers, duplicate them. Let's just snap it above the layer. Change the color of this to cyan, and then also duplicate this adjustment layer and change that to cyan so that we know what we're doing. I'm going to press the U button on this, and then I'm going to select these two keyframes, right click, keyframe assistant and time reverse keyframes. With the composition, we can just right click, go to time reverse layer. And then with this pulse, we just need to drop down the surface and point at bump 2. And then I just want to move to, let's say about here, because there's quite a bit of easing on this. I'm just going to select all of these and move this forward. So I've got it at 1 second and 16 frames. Let's just give this a preview. I'm going to move to about here just so that we see what's going on. I want a global glow on this entire scene. So I'm going to come over to Layer, New, Adjustment Layer. Enter key, let's rename this, call Global Glow. Come over to the Effects and Presets, type in Glow, double click that, and let's just change the threshold. Let's drag that up to 75 and take this right up to 602. Turn that on and off, and you can see there's just a bit more glow of this, like it is lighting up the background as it twists around. Next thing, let's create a new layer, adjustment layer, and I'm going to rename this to Impact Glow. Let's double click on the glow again. Let's take this threshold down to, let's say, about 30, and then let's change this glow radius. Let's take it up to, say, about 125, and also change this adjustment layer to additive. So at 1 second, 14 frames when and land happens, I'm going to press the T key, add a keyframe for opacity. Let's just move 2 frames backwards and take this down to 0. Then I'm just going to move to about here, 1 second and 22 frames, and take this down to 0 again. Select all the keyframes, press the F9 key, and then this comes straight back in. So move over to about, say about here, so it's loading up. Add a keyframe. Let's move to 217 when it's at about the same place as the first pulse. Take that up to 100, and then just move over to 3 seconds and take this down to 0. Now in the example, I actually have this logo changing to a pink as this pulse happens. So with the first element 3D layer selected, I'm going to come over to Effects and Presets, type in Tint. I'm going to double click this. I'm going to change both of these colors. So let's select this FF0042. Then I'm going to spot that. Then I'm going to keyframe the amount of tint. Let's actually move 1 frame forward, press the U key. I already added the keyframe, and just move that to 2 seconds and 18 frames. Then move to, let's say, 2.5 seconds, 2.15. Take that down to 0. Then at about, let's just take a look at that. Then I want to fade this actual logo out. So with the element 3D layer selected, press Shift and T for opacity. Let's add an opacity here. Just going to move this 1 keyframe back so it starts fading out already. And at about 2 seconds 21, I want this to go pretty quickly. I'm going to take that down to 0. Now we just need to copy this over to the other layer. The way I'm going to do this is select the tint word. This will copy all of the attributes of the tint effect, and then select the opacity word. Make sure that your time indicator is on that first frame over there. Press C to copy, or Command C on an Apple. Select the element 3D layer above it and paste it on that layer. Now if we just play through, this will affect both layers. Now I do have a logo which I brought in, so in my project panel, just going to open that up, and then I just want to grab that and drop this into my scene. I'm also going to just scale this down, so press the S key, take this down to, let's say, about this size, align this to the center just to make sure, and then I'm just going to tint this. So coming over here, we can actually just copy this color. Okay, go to the logo, fill, double click, and that should be good. Then all I did in my animation is I moved to about 3 seconds and 5 frames. P key for position. Added a keyframe, pressed Shift and page down to move 10 frames forward. And I just moved this up by Shift up twice. And then let's just add some text in here. I'm going to go to Layer, New, Text Layer. And just start typing motion logo. I have later here, and I'm just going to select black and just drop this down to, let's say, about here. Then I'm just going to spot this color over here. I'm going to press S for scale and Shift T for opacity. Turn these keyframes on where at the same time as when the logo moves. Then move back to about here. Take the opacity down and just take the scale down, let's say about 90%. Select all these layers, press the F9 key, go into the graph editor, select these first keyframes, and we're just going to shift and pull them until they snap. The last thing we need to do is just fade out the background, and this can easily be done just by, let's add it above the bump too. So select the layer, new, solid. Let's make this a black, press OK. I'm going to exit the graph editor, and then I have transparency on this text, so we can just press T, copy these frames, move over to make sure that you're at the right keyframe time, and paste it on the black layer. Let's give this one more test. Now something we need to do is we need to crop this logo layer. Just bring this forward to about here. Now I do have an extensive tutorial on glitches. If you take a look in the description or right at the top of this video right now, you can take a look at different techniques, but I'm going to do something very quick to help with this transition. And the way we're going to do this is just right click, layer, new, adjustment layer, and I'm going to select my rectangle tool with the layer selected. I'm just going to draw over areas like this. Let's say something like that, and something like that, and then a slight box over here. With the adjustment layer selected, come over to Effects and Presets, type in Transform, and then just take the scale up. I'm going to say about 172. Let's move over to about 219, and that's fading out, and just bring this in over here and leave this for about 3 frames. And then it's up to you to actually take that global glow down just by pressing the T key, adding an opacity, and take it off. Let's say at about 3 seconds. If you want to see more tutorials like this, take a look at either of the videos popping up on screen right now. Keep animating, and until next time.